The sound came just before dawn. A wet, dragging scrape against the side of the cabin, followed by the sharp crack of a branch breaking in the frozen dark. Elijah Crane froze where he stood, the lantern trembling in his grip. Outside, the forest lay smothered under fog, its trees like gaunt fingers. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise itself. Every instinct in Elijah told him it wasn't an animal. The noise came again, closer now. Deliberate, searching. He whispered to himself that it was just the wind, but even the wind had stopped listening. Somewhere beyond the tree line, something shifted. Not walking, not crawling, but circling. And when Elijah stepped to the window, he saw for the briefest heartbeat the reflection of a woman's face where his should have been. Morning comes colorless. The forest seems to lean closer now, each tree holding its breath. Elijah wakes to find the frost melted only around the cabin's foundation, as if the ground itself had been warmed overnight. He steps outside with his coffee, boots sinking into soft earth that should have been frozen solid. That's when he notices the prints, dozens of them, circling, overlapping, leading nowhere. Bare feet, smaller than his own, delicate, like a woman's. His stomach knots as he realizes they don't begin or end. They simply exist. He lifts his Polaroid and clicks a photo. The picture develops in seconds, but when it clears, the prints are gone from the ground. Yet, they remain in the photo. In town, Elijah stops at the general store to ask about local tracks. The clerk, an old trapper named Harlan, turns pale when Elijah shows the photo. "Those aren't animal prints," he mutters. "That's the Warrens' land. Best leave it quiet." He tells Elijah of Thomas Warren, who went missing after his wife and son vanished one snowstorm night. How people heard her crying through the trees for weeks. Elijah leaves the store with more silence than answers, the photograph still warm in his pocket. That night, back at the cabin, the wind carries the faintest whisper. "Elijah!" The following evening, Elijah finds deep claw marks on the cabin's back door, wider, fresher, as though something had returned. He studies them with a trembling flashlight. The marks aren't from any animal. They're hand-shaped, the fingers too long, the nails sharp enough to cut through oak. Beneath them, the initials, MW, appear carved into the wood. His flashlight dies suddenly, plunging him into darkness. From the edge of the forest, a single whisper breaks the silence. Soft, pleading, familiar. That night, Elijah mounts his first trail camera to the old birch by the tree line. He faces it toward the cabin, its red light blinking softly. The woods feel alive, restless. He sets another camera near the creek, its lens aimed into shadow. As he walks back, the sound returns, dragging, scrapping, circling. He turns, but sees only fog. The next morning, when he checks the film, a figure stands at the cabin door, facing the camera, motionless. Her dress ripples as though caught in wind, but there was no wind that night. Night folds over the woods like wet cloth. Inside the cabin, Elijah sits hunched over his old film projector, reels spread across the table. The faint hum of the machine mixes with the slow tick of the lantern. As the footage begins to play, the walls breathe with flickering shadows. At first is ordinary. The cabin, still and empty, snow drifting past the lens. Then, at the 30-second mark, something shifts in the corner of the frame. Movement, faint, uncertain. A pale shape slips between two trees, pausing, watching. Elijah leans closer, breath caught. The figure seems to turn toward the camera, its eyes glowing like silver coins, before vanishing completely. The reel spins to its end, flapping in silence, as if waiting for him to rewind it again. He replays the footage again and again, adjusting focus, slowing the reel frame by frame. Each time the figure lingers a second longer, as if aware of being watched. The static crackles, and Elijah's reflection in the projector lens distorts. two faces overlapping, his and someone else. He writes frantic notes in his journal, sketching what he sees. The curve of a woman's shoulder, the glint of eyes too human to be chance. The night outside presses close against the window panes. Then, without warning, the projector clicks off. In the sudden dark, Elijah hears it again, that dragging sound, now inside the walls. Morning brings only more questions. Elijah steps outside and follows the line of his cameras through the snow. Each one faces the cabin, lenses fogged but intact. Then he notices something strange. A second set of footprints parallel to his, small and bare, leading from one camera to the next. The prints circle each camera in careful loops, as though someone had been studying them. Elijah kneels, pressing his gloved hand beside the prints. They're warm. The snow melts slightly beneath his touch, releasing a faint scent of iron, blood or rust. He can't tell. Sheriff Lowell Briggs drives up that afternoon, his patrol car crunching over ice. He's tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seem to see too much. Elijah tells him about the footage, the prints, the sounds in the night. Briggs listens, his face tightening. "You're living on bad land," he says quietly. The Warrens were never found because they didn't leave. He advises Elijah to pack up before winter deepens. But as he turns to leave, Elijah shows him the developed photo, the figure near the cabin. Briggs studies it long, his jaw stiff. "You didn't take this last night," he mutters. "This picture's from '49. That night, Elijah installs 2 more cameras, defying Briggs' warning. He mounts one facing the creek, another deep in the woods. When he returns to the cabin, he feels watched. Every crunch of his boots echoing too long. The woods hum faintly, a sound beneath hearing. Inside, he logs the footage by number, writing timestamps in neat, soldierly script. He hesitates before writing the final note. "If I disappear, start with real fool." He sets the last camera near the window, its red light blinking steady like a heartbeat. Outside, just before he shutters the lamp, something passes by the lens. A shape too tall, too still, too familiar. The following night, Elijah develops the new film alone. The reels click and whir, the projector breathing like a tired heart. On screen, the cabin stands silent beneath snow. Then from the left edge of the frame, a figure enters, slowly, confidently. A man in an old trapper's coat, face hidden by shadow, steps up to the cabin door and vanishes through it without opening it. Elijah rewinds, his pulse pounding. The frame freezes on the man's face as he turns. The same angular jaw, the same scar above the brow Elijah saw in an old newspaper photo. It's Thomas Warren, dead nearly 30 years. Elijah's hand trembles as the film burns in the projector's heat, the man's image melting into smoke. Elijah digs through his trunk of old books and clippings, finding the Warrens' obituary. The dates don't add up. Thomas was declared dead in 1949, but a witness claimed seeing him near the river years later. The article mentions unusual light near the cabin, the night the family vanished. As Elijah reads, a low murmur fills the cabin, like someone whispering just behind the walls. He steps closer to the logs, ear pressed against the cold pine. The whisper shapes his name. He jerks back, knocking over the lantern, flame flaring across the floor before dying in a hiss of smoke. Silence falls again to absolute, to be empty. Sleep comes shallow and full of noise. Elijah dreams of snow falling inside the cabin, of frost crawling across the ceiling beams. In the dream, the Warrens stand at the edge of his bed. Thomas holding an oil lamp, Martha clutching a child's hand. Their faces shimmer, half melted, their mouths moving soundlessly. The child raises a small wooden toy, its eyes painted black. Elijah wakes, gasping, frost coating his breath in the air. His sheets are damp and cold. When he looks toward the corner of the room, the toy from his dream rests there, wooden, cracked and dusted with snow. The next day, Elijah hikes into town again, his hands trembling as he carries the toy in a burlap sack. Sheriff Briggs meets him outside the post office. When Elijah shows him the toy, Briggs' face drains of color. "We found that same thing by the river in 49, he whispers. "That's how we knew the boy was gone." He tells Elijah that the Warrens' graves were empty when they dug them years ago. Elijah leaves without a word, clutching the sack like a confession. Snow begins to fall, each flake heavy, deliberate, as though the sky itself were remembering. Back at the cabin, Elijah develops his newest reel. The image flickers to life, the camera's view of the cabin from the tree line. He watches himself exit the cabin and disappear toward the creek. But when he reappears, he's not alone. A woman walks beside him, her figure shimmering as if caught between moments. Her face turns briefly toward the lens. Martha Warren, unmistakably alive in the frame. Elijah reels backward, heart pounding. On the wall behind him, the reflection of the projector shows not one, but three shadows. His own, the woman's, and a small child's, holding her hand. Snow falls relentlessly that night, thick and soundless. Elijah wakes to the sound of something dragging across the roof, a slow, scraping rhythm that follows him as he moves through the cabin. When he reaches for his projector reels, he freezes. Every single one is gone. The shelves are empty, dust swirled into new patterns, as though hands had searched carefully and taken only what mattered. His notebooks are untouched, only the film gone. As he kneels to check the floorboards, his fingers brush something round and metallic. Beneath the bed lies an old canister, rusted, older than his equipment. A note taped to its lid reads, in fading ink, "Property of T. Warren, December 1949. He threads the ancient film onto the projector, breath shallow, heart echoing in his ears. The film crackles, skipping frames like a broken heartbeat. On screen, the Warrens' cabin in deep winter, snow piling high. A man, Thomas Warren, chops wood outside, glancing toward the camera as though aware of being filmed. Then, the lens turns slightly, showing Martha standing at the window, her lips moving silently. She points toward the tree line, fear in her eyes. Behind her, a small shadow moves, a boy running. Then static, a brief flash of white, and the image of Thomas dragging something heavy through the snow. The film stops. Elijah stands frozen, unable to breathe. Elijah rewinds, watching frame by frame. When he slows the film, something new emerges, faint outlines in the snow around Thomas, as if figures stood watching from the tree line. 5, maybe 6 of them, barely visible, transparent. In one frame, one of the shadows lifts its head, revealing Elijah's own face staring back. He stumbles backward, knocking over the lantern, plunging the room to darkness. The film keeps running, light from the projector burning through the last of the frames, leaving only the sound of static, whispering, breathing, alive. When dawn comes, the projector is cold, its film strip melted and fused. Elijah gathers what remains, a few burnt frames, and holds them to the window light. The shadows on the film aren't random, they're outlines of hands pressed against glass. Each frame identical. He sets them down carefully. But as he does, one edge still faintly moves, a tiny shift, as though something behind the film were trying to get out. He stares at it until his reflection disappears, and Martha's face takes its place, smiling faintly from the darkened glass. As night falls again, Elijah places the damaged canister on the table and begins writing. His hand trembles as he documents every detail. The missing reels, the moving film, the faces in the snow. Halfway through his notes, a drop of water falls onto the page. He looks up. The ceiling drips, one line then another, until it forms a steady stream. He stands, realizing the sound isn't water at all. its film unraveling. From the rafters above, dozens of torn reels hang down like vines, slowly swaying. The whispering begins again, his name, over and over. Elijah reaches for his camera, and the red light blinks once, then dies. By morning, the storm has swallowed the woods in gray silence. Elijah can't shake the thought of the heavy bundle Thomas dragged in the old film. He follows the image burned in his mind to the tree line, where the ground dips toward the creek. There, beneath the birch where his first camera stands, he begins to dig. The shovel cuts through frozen soil with dull, rhythmic thuds. Each strike feels rehearsed, as if his hands already knew the place. Hours pass. The light shifts from blue to iron. Then, the shovel hits something solid. He clears the dirt away to reveal what looks like a rib cage, small, half-buried, wrapped in what remains of a child's nightshirt. Elijah stumbles backward, choking on cold air. He wraps the bones gently in his coat, setting them atop the frozen ground. A sense of terrible calm settles over him. The whispering in the trees grows clearer, voices overlapping in soft cadence. Elijah kneels, whispering back. Words not his own, words that taste like memory. The snow swirls harder, erasing his footprints. Then from behind him a new sound. Boots on frost. Sheriff Briggs steps into the clearing, his breath visible, eyes narrowing as he takes in the scene. Elijah looks up, voice shaking. "I didn't kill them," he says. Briggs' face is pale as he replies, "I know, but you weren't the first one who found them." They return to the cabin together, the bundle placed on the table. Briggs insists on calling it in, but the radio crackles with static. No signal. He turns to Elijah, asking where he found the camera footage. Elijah shows him the reels, the burned film, the strange canister. Briggs studies them in silence, then loads the last intact reel into the projector. The film begins, Elijah digging, but as the frames roll on, Briggs' face changes. The man on screen isn't Elijah. It's Thomas Warren in the same flannel, same boots, same clearing. Yet when the camera pans back, Elijah is seen standing behind him, watching. Briggs turns, eyes wide. "You filmed this yourself?" Elijah shakes his head violently. "That's not me." Briggs doesn't answer. Outside, the wind howls through the eaves, a low, human sound. The light flickers. For an instant, Elijah's reflection in the window shows Thomas's face instead. The sheriff draws closer to the table, staring at the burned frames. He notices something new. Faint lettering along the film's edge. He lifts it toward the light and reads aloud, voice breaking. "We never left." Panic breaks through calm. Briggs grabs his coat, muttering that they have to leave now. Elijah hesitates, drawn toward the window where faint figures stand among the trees. A woman, a man, and a boy. Martha raises her hand as if to wave. Briggs shouts his name, but Elijah steps closer, lips parting. The boy smiles, the same wooden toy dangling from his hand. The wind surges, the lantern dies, and the sheriff's voice is drowned out by the sudden roar of the storm. When the wind settles, only Briggs remains, kneeling in the dark, snow seeping through the cracks of the cabin walls. The trail cameras outside blink red, one by one, until all go dark. Night falls like a slow collapse. Sheriff Briggs sits alone in the cabin, his flashlight trembling in his grip. Elijah is gone, vanished into the storm. The sheriff's breath clouds in the bitter air as he searches the floor for signs of struggle. Then, from the corner of the room, he hears the faint whir of a machine. One of the trail cameras has turned itself on. Its red light blinks rhythmically, recording nothing but the empty cabin. Briggs approaches, leaning close to the lens, his own reflection swallowed by the glare. Behind him, through the window, a pale figure drifts past, barely visible, almost curious. Briggs doesn't notice. He simply whispers, "What did you see, Elijah?" Morning brings no sun, only gray silence and a cabin heavy with frost. Briggs rewinds the camera's memory reel and presses play. The footage shows Elijah the previous night, kneeling by the table, writing in his journal. His lips move silently. Then he stands, places a sheet of paper on the table, and walks to the door. Just before leaving, he turns to face the camera and mouths the words, "If you find this, don't look." Briggs' hands tighten around the camera. He looks toward the table. The note is still there, edges curled, ink bleeding from melted snow. Briggs follows Elijah's trail into the woods, the camera slung over his shoulder. The trees seem to close around him, branches arching like ribs. He finds the first camera near the birch, its lens cracked but still warm. The snow beneath it is disturbed. 2 sets of footprints. Elijah's boots and smaller, bare ones beside them. The prints lead deeper into the forest, toward the creek. Briggs breathes heavily, his flashlight shaking. Somewhere ahead he hears laughter. Soft, high, the voice of a child. He calls Elijah's name, but the forest answers with silence. He reaches the creek, frozen solid, the surface cracked like glass. There, caught beneath the ice, lies Elijah's trail camera, still blinking faintly. Briggs kneels, scraping at the ice with his knife until the red light fades. He retrieves the device, cradling it in gloved hands. As he plays back the footage on its tiny screen, the image flickers. Elijah walking toward the creek, whispering to someone unseen beside him. Then, a sudden motion. Elijah turns, face pale with terror, and points at the lens. The image distorts, the screen filling with static and shapes that resemble reaching hands. When it clears, Elijah is gone. The forest stands empty. Dark, but forest stands empty. Briggs returns to the cabin one last time. He sets the camera on the table and sits across from it, recording. His voice is low, shaking. "My name is Sheriff Lowell Briggs. This is the last record of Elijah Crane." He hesitates, eyes drifting to the door. Whatever lives in these woods, it remembers. It repeats. He stops speaking. A soft creak sounds from above, the roof beams shifting under invisible weight. He glances up, then back to the camera. Behind him, faint figures take shape in the frost on the window. A man, a woman, and a child, all watching. The camera's light blinks once more, then goes out. Months later, spring thaw reaches the northern woods. The cabin sits abandoned, roof sagging beneath the melt. A search team led by a Sheriff Briggs deputy trudges through ankle-deep mud to find what's left. Inside, dust and frost have fused the air into silence. They find the sheriff's coat on a chair, his badge resting on the table beside the final trail camera. No sign of Briggs or Elijah. When the deputy presses the camera's power button, it hums weakly to life. The first frame appears. The cabin interior, empty, filmed from the same table where they now stand. Then, faint movement at the window, a pale hand tapping the glass from outside. They develop the camera's footage at the sheriff's office, transferring each reel by hand. The projector sputters in the dim archive room. Frame after frame reveals nothing but static until one moment clears. Sheriff Briggs sitting at the table, recording himself. His voice is faint beneath the hiss. It remembers. It repeats. The deputy leans forward. In the next frame, Briggs glances up toward the ceiling, mouth half open. Then, darkness. The final second shows only a blur of faces pressed close to the lens. Eyes wide, mouths still. The projector bulb pops, plunging the room into darkness. The deputy drives back to the cabin at dusk, unable to let the mystery rest. He parks at the edge of the property. The forest hums with the slow thaw of running water. Inside, the air smells of rust and pine sap. On the floor near the hearth, he finds a child's wooden toy soldier, the same one from the Warrens' photograph decades earlier. As he bends to pick it up, the wind closes the cabin door behind him. The latch falls. From somewhere deep in the woods, a lantern flickers, moving slowly between the trees. He steps outside, following the light. The forest seems endless, the ground soft with thaw. Each few yards, another camera emerges from the slush, half buried, blinking red. He gathers them one by one, their lights sensing like a pulse. The last camera lies beside the creek, lens aimed back toward the cabin. He wipes the mud from its surface and stares into it. For a moment, the lens reflects only his own weary face. Then faintly, another appears behind him, Elijah Crane, smiling, lips moving soundlessly. The deputy drops the device, stumbling backward as the red light flares. Weeks later, the recovered cameras are sealed in evidence boxes, their contents labeled but never viewed again. The cabin is reclaimed by forest growth. Moss creeps through the cracks, the roof collapsing inward. Locals whisper that on cold nights a red light still pulses faintly through the trees. The final known photograph sits filed under Unexplained. The cabin in early dawn, snow melted. A man standing at the tree line. His face matches Elijah Crane's, though the timestamp reads 1981, 3 years after his disappearance. In the photo's corner, faint letters scratched in frost spell a single word. Again!